Welcome to the Game Plan Podcast. I'm Tommy Ashley. That's Greg Barnes. That's Empty Space. Sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com, and of course on this show, Dollar Shave Club. Talk about them a little later. Jason Staples is coming. He says he is signing in, having a little bit of technical difficulties. That's what happens, I guess, when it gets dark early and you try to play golf in the dark. Greg Barnes is certainly here. Greg, you wrote a column about this team, about the difference that this team is improving and the ACC is imploding. And we'll talk about the ACC before Jason gets here. When I saw those CFP rankings, I was like, well, how far is this league fallen? I mean, it's unbelievable, especially given that the team at the top was Virginia. I mean, what world are we living in?
Yeah, right. I think that speaks to the fact that you give credit to Virginia, but I think anybody that has watched Virginia knows that that's not a national championship caliber team. No offense to Tony Elliott, but that's just kind of where we're at. And the teams that we thought were going to be really good this year, Clemson and Florida State, and Miami, haven't been. Of course, Florida State and Clemson have really taken a step down the hill, and Miami's Miami, right? I mean, it's a team that's got the talent that they should be a legitimate top 10 team. And Mario Cristobal is the incredible governor of all things, despite the talent that he has. I think a serious concern, and we've talked a lot in the past, Tommy, about the success initiatives, and now we have the viewership initiatives that are going to be paying out more money. And I think part of the idea is that, hey, if you pay out more money, more programs are going to invest the way that they need to invest. But when you've got so much money coming into the SEC and to the Big Ten, it's hard to compete. And we knew that gap, the revenue gap, was going to start widening. And it already has a little bit. It's going to be even more so in the next several years. And I think we're starting to see that. And unfortunately, we're seeing it a lot on the basketball side of things. Of course, the ACC only got 4 teams in to March Madness last spring. Only one team made it past the first round, which is the first time that's happened since the NCAA tournament expanded. So we're seeing it in both revenue sports, which is not a good thing. But on the football side especially, I think the silver lining, if you want to call it that, is that if you're willing to invest some money, there's opportunity there. And one thing that we talked about all offseason is that North Carolina has finally invested the money. So the road is open. It's like there for the taking. Now it just has to pay off, and that's the good thing for Carolina, is that after just a disastrous start, both in and outside of the program, Belichick has done a good job kind of rallying the troops. And yes, North Carolina is not playing well against really good teams, but they're not getting blown out by average Power 4 teams anymore either. And so we're seeing a slow step in the right direction. That's got to pick up. That momentum has to continue. And another great opportunity for that on Saturday against Stanford.
Indeed. And Jason Staples has joined us here. If you're not watching the YouTube, if you're on the audio version here, is it all about money, Jason? And we're going to talk about Carolina and Stanford because that's important. But I think this is important too, because it's not like ACC teams are not competing with Alabama or the big names. They're losing to other ACC schools that are not very good. You know, it's not like they're going 0-4 and out of conference and 8-0 in conference. Jason, is it just a money thing? It seems like it's more than that for this conference.
Well, it's a brand issue to me. I mean, money is a huge factor. Now, those two things are intimately connected, right? The big money programs that tend to bring in more eyeballs are going to get favorable treatment from networks, from media, from wherever, partly because they're huge brands and they just have, associations with those programs. So, this year there are a bunch of teams that from say the Big Ten or the SEC, where if they played, any given ACC team that's up toward the top of the conference or even in the middle of the conference, it's going to be a competitive game. But when it comes down to it, if you're a casual, and actually, to be honest, I think most media who cover the sport are more or less casuals, with the exception of the few teams that they cover, right? Because you can't watch everything. You can't. Even, the Kirk Herbstreits of the world who have, access to everything, they're not watching every play of every game. They just aren't. So if it comes down to it, and you have, for example, a game between SMU and Auburn, off the top of your head, who do you expect to win the game?
Auburn. If
Of course. Right? They played for 2 national championships in the last 15 years, or 20 years. They have tons of money and investment. They got, rivalry with Alabama. You think of them in the same breath as Alabama in certain respects. And you go, okay, well, yeah, Auburn should be the better team. And it doesn't really matter that SMU would probably beat Auburn, let's say 7 times out of 10 this year, maybe more. That's not a very good Auburn team. But when you have a bad Auburn team, that then let's say you have a Mizzou or an Oklahoma go in and they beat a bad Auburn team, you go, well, that may be a bad Auburn, but it's still Auburn. Versus that's a really good SMU, but I mean, it's SMU. Or, Virginia is really playing well this year, but it's Virginia. I mean, can Virginia be that good? Right? And it's the same problem with like a Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech took Georgia to how many overtimes last year?
Yeah, that was an epic one. I can't remember, but it was a
What,
lot.
like 7, something like that. It was crazy. And then all of a sudden you say, wait, well, so does that mean Georgia Tech should get respect for that? Should Georgia Tech get the benefit of the doubt since they returned a lot of those key players and so on, and they've only lost 1 game in their conference? And no, they don't get the benefit of that doubt, because the wins and you hear people talk about quality losses, right? In the ACC, you don't have quality losses because the perception is that the brands just aren't there for the quality losses. So even in like the Big Ten, where you have an Indiana that doesn't have the traditional brand, because Indiana's in the Big Ten, and then you associate that with, well, they got Ohio State, they've got Michigan, they've got Oregon, they've got USC. Even if they haven't beaten those teams necessarily, now they did beat Oregon, and I think Indiana is a top 5 team this year. They're going to get the benefit of the doubt simply because of affiliation with those other programs in a way that the ACC tends not to. If there is a program in the ACC that's it's going to be Clemson or Florida State. And we saw in 2023 that when it came down to it, Florida State didn't get that respect either. So this is just the nature of it. And then you tie in the money, and who does ESPN, who does Fox actually want to be in those big games? It's the programs where they've got the most money tied up and invested. So it's a money thing, and it's a brand thing. And then, as you said, Greg, once you start getting this amount of money involved in the brands that have that money, it starts to get harder and harder to win and to compete and to have the players to compete. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's where we are. And, I'm afraid that the ACC is just kind of, that's reality for the foreseeable future.
Withering. I thought you were going to say withering on the vine, because that's what it feels like. And I think you need to get your microphone on. I think your computer's your audio on there.
One point that I made in my column, Tommy, and not to pile on Jim Phillips, because I know he kind of stepped into a difficult situation. I don't think he has helped himself. I mean, think about the recent round of expansion, right? And it kind of all started when the SEC pulled Texas and Oklahoma. How have they been over the last 25 years in football? Pretty good, right? And then the Big Ten said, well, we've got to respond. And so they go and they get Oregon and Washington and USC and some pretty big name football schools. Well, then Carolina or the ACC says, hang on, guys. Hey, we're going to match you. We're going to get Stanford. We're going to get California. And then we're also going to get SMU. And at least SMU has, now granted, it's been a while, but they have a history and there's money there for that program to be okay. And I think Lashley's a good coach and they're going to be okay. But when you're reactive in nature to that extent and you pull in those teams, what are we doing? You're not helping any sport. You're trying to bring in a name program like Stanford, which has money issues. Cal has no money. I mean, they're in debt up to their eyeballs. And then you're making a play on resurrecting a SMU program that really hasn't been relevant since they got the death penalty.
Now, I will say this. Both Stanford and SMU, if their alumni bases really want to be, can play with the big boys. Sure. I mean, SMU has 29 billionaire boosters for their football program. So if they really want to compete, and all indications are that they want to, at least some of those boosters are ponying up, as it were. That makes them legitimate in terms of contenders for the future, because they're going to be able to go out and do what like Texas Tech did this year and just buy players. They should be able to do that. And, SMU has a history of being able to do that.
The fact that SMU said, we don't want any revenue for a few years.
we just want to come to the party.
We want to play the table.
We'll bring the beer. They're those people.
They're bringing multiple kegs. They're catering the whole party. They just wanted an invite. They just wanted to be able to get in the door, and they have enough money. They don't have to worry about that. So that makes them scary competitively. But the in a lot of ways, adding them was the worst of all worlds for the ACC, because you add a program that can compete that they're going to be able to compete because of that money and because of what they're going to be able to do there. They're going to be able to compete, but they're competing without the brand. They don't have, it was so long ago that they were competitive before the death penalty that they don't carry the same cachet as University of Texas or Texas A&M, or even, TCU carries more brand cachet than SMU. They probably shouldn't at this stage, but they do, because it's been so long since SMU has even been a major conference team. And so what you did is you brought in a team, and I said this when they first got added, you just brought in a team that does exactly the opposite of what you want. What you want when you add a team to your conference is you want to bring in an enormous brand that everybody thinks is great, but actually is kind of down low, not all that good year in, year out. You want the University of Texas, a program that has underachieved for all but 2 years out of the last 40. You want them. You're like, Texas, come on down. We would love to have your brand, your cachet, everything that you bring to the table, so that you can disappoint every year in our conference and make all of the rest of us look good. Texas is perfect for that. Texas A&M is close to that, right? SMU is the opposite. They're a sleeping giant. You just brought a team that could potentially become the giant in your conference without the cachet. What are you even doing?
Yep.
No,
they did that with Miami. The ACC got that one with Miami.
Yeah. And the thing is, Stanford too, oil money's got nothing on the tech money that Stanford could potentially throw in there. If some of their alums decided that they wanted to get really involved and make them competitive, and Andrew Luck's able to put the full court press on some of those guys. You said Stanford has some money problems or whatever. Whatever money problems Stanford has are temporary and illusory, because they've got more money than just about anybody that's available to them. It's just a matter of, convincing one of their, I think they've got something like 70 billionaire alumni, something like that. It's something insane. I'll look it up in a second. Jeez. But they've got an insane number of billionaire alumni for whom a donation is a rounding error. So, they can go ahead and get really good really quickly, potentially. They're a dangerous team too.
Well, their thing is not having the money. Theirs is a spending issue. They don't want to come off of it yet. SMU folks want to come off of it, and we saw it. SMU goes to the ACC championship game in year one. They go to the playoff in year one. But we're talking about Carolina, Stanford today on the game plan. So we're going to transition to that. And I think, Greg, the first question I'm going to ask you about this game is what can Carolina accomplish in this game other than tacking on another win in the win column? Because a lot of people are going to say Stanford's not very good. They're not. They're going to say that it's not. They were expected to win and they did win, which, that's not always been the case for North Carolina. What is Carolina looking to accomplish going into this weekend? Is it the traditional stacking of days, stacking of wins, all that stuff, or is there something else going on?
Well, from a broad view, yes, that's true. And I think it's important for people to understand one of the points that we harped on for so long to start the year is that North Carolina was not competitive against P4 teams. And granted, TCU's a lot better than what Carolina has played of late, except maybe Virginia. But they were getting blown out by the likes of TCU and Central Florida and Clemson. Clemson's not a very good football program.
Neither is UCF too. Woof.
Yeah, right. And so when you look at what happened in those games, you're thinking, oh, like this is really bad. And it was really bad.
It was really bad.
But what we've seen over the last 3 games is not that Carolina is playing these fantastic opponents, although I do think Virginia is a legitimate top 25 team. They were much more competitive, and they were in the game. As odd as it may sound, we're like, look, get to the fourth quarter and be competitive. That's a step in the right direction. Well, they should have beat Cal. They should have beat Virginia, but they didn't. But they were competitive in those games, which was a change from what we had seen. Well, then they got over the hump last week, and they kind of had a breakout game. And yes, these are not SEC caliber teams that they're playing. I get it. But you're still seeing the progress. And I think from a big level, big picture perspective, that's important. You're seeing trends in the right direction. Stanford, North Carolina was not favored at Syracuse. They are favored Saturday. I would say the spread's probably higher than it should be. But regardless, this is another game that, as you said, Carolina should win. They're expected to win. And they really need to keep building on what we've seen of late. Defensively, I think they've made a lot of strides. I think they're playing as a group. They don't have many breakdowns at the individual level. And as we talked about last week, you don't have to have elite talent on defense. If your guys are playing together, they know their assignments, you have a decent scheme, you can be successful against most teams to some degree. And that's what we're seeing from North Carolina. And they're having some certain players along the defensive line kind of step up. Offensively, we finally saw a couple of explosive plays last week. We saw 3 of 40-plus yards. Like, we haven't seen that all season long. And just having a handful of plays like that changes the entire conversation about the offense, even though when you take away those 3 plays, there's still a lot that needs to be worked on. And I think that's kind of the key is, as we'll get into with Stanford, there's opportunity there for more explosive plays. But it's another opportunity for Gio Lopez to come out to play in a game a week after he had a pretty good game. And we talked about, a couple weeks ago, how much better he played last year at South Alabama than what he did the first half of the year this year. Well, now he's got a confidence game under his belt. How much does that change things for him? How much does that slow things down and allow him to get rid of the ball quicker? These are all important details that we're going to get to see on Saturday, what type of growth occurs. And that's very important because, look, yes, they should win this game. Yes, they should probably beat Wake Forest, although Wake Forest is better than Stanford. Wake Forest is better than Syracuse. But if you can put a good game together on Saturday, now you're talking about, okay, well, not only you have Duke coming up, you got State there at the end of the year. And regardless of what fans may say, if you play well enough over the next several weeks and you can get to that game against NC State and maybe still that one, well, now the conversation changes going into the offseason of like, they were horrible early, but they started showing life late. What can next year be like? That's what the program needs drastically.
Jason, one of the things we talked about with Belichick's teams is how, and I remember this conversation probably on this very podcast, how they get better in November and December for the pros. But we've seen that with this North Carolina team. A lot of people are talking about in the chat are talking about the offense. Preston with his improved from putrid to just bad. How big a difference is it's like no chance to slim chance. How big a difference is it though to have Blaske back at center and Hall and McVay or whoever is going to be on the outside joining him there? Because I think Blaske at center, Gio Lopez looked like a different quarterback to me just by that change. But you broke the film down. How big a deal is that for the offense?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I saw with Blaske was the snap speed. I think actually what they were getting at center blocking wise was pretty good over the course of the season, which is why they didn't make that move as soon as Blaske got healthy. They were trying to, maintain as they were trying to be as good as they could be across all the positions. And we've talked about that sometimes you don't put the best guy at his best position because he's the best guy over here too, even though that's his fourth best position or whatever. And that was kind of where they got. But once he actually had to go to quarterback, I think you did see a difference in terms of the consistency of the snaps in terms of when they arrive, how quickly they get there, and then where they are. So, the difference between, a foot of variance or 2 feet of variance in terms of snap is pretty significant because the quarterback has to look and find the ball first. But if he doesn't really have to think about where the snap is, that allows his eyes to get to other things earlier and easier. And I do think that was a factor for Lopez in the second half. I also think, though, that basically what you got from the left tackle spot with Blaske at center was also a reason that things were ultimately better. Jordan Hall played well. And, it's worth noting that Hall had played some at left tackle before Blaske moved into center. There was at least one drive. I think there might have been 2 drives where Blaske lined up at left guard.
Yep.
Because they were wanting to kind of try out, can Jordan Hall play out here? And he's a guy that I had as a, talented, but it's probably a year away from really being that guy, being a contributor out there in the preseason scouting reports where, I said physically, he's probably your most talented of your left tackle prospects, but he's probably a full year away. And one thing I have to say, I think there's been some pretty good evidence that Friend can coach the offensive line. Like there has been some development up front in terms of what we've seen from some of these guys. McVay and Jordan Hall are kind of exhibits A and B on this of being able, and Lindbergh would be C in terms of guys who are playing now and they've gotten some opportunities and they're better than they were when we last saw them. Lindbergh played better at center than what we expected him to play. And then when we've seen McVay now, he's showing some good consistency and some good fundamentals. There's been some real improvement from some of these guys in terms of pad level and everything. Now, Hall does play high. I mean, he's 6'8", 6'9". He still struggles a little bit to bend the way that you want. He's not the most powerful guy, so some of the bull rush guys might be able to get up under him at times. But he showed enough to say, well, maybe he actually is the solution going forward to be the best overall 5 that you got up front. Maybe. And if that's the case, that does make it a little easier for you because with Blaske at center, you do make it easier on your quarterback because of the consistency in terms of the snaps. And again, I think Lindbergh was pretty good in terms of not getting pushed around and getting on blocks and so on. And he deserves credit for that. But I do think that the snapping difference matters a little bit for your quarterback who already tends to have a little bit of slow eyes on that anyway. So, by the way, I looked it up. Stanford has 69 at last count, 69 billionaire alumni. And some of these are like the mega billionaire types, like Sergey Brin and Larry Page, the founders of a little company called Alphabet, Google,
That's ridiculous.
and so on. So when you've got those kinds of alumni, just ask Michigan what happens when a guy like, Larry Ellison from Oracle, who's one of those mega billionaires, decides, I want to see my team win. I just want to go, you know what? Who's the best quarterback this year? Who's the best quarterback from high school? Okay. How much is it going to take to get him? All right. You just take that.
And wasn't that his girlfriend's school?
His
and
wife.
Therefore
Yeah, it's his wife. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. He's like, well, my wife likes to watch Michigan win. So let's see if we can pay for them to win more. Right? Or ask Oregon.
Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah. What difference does it make for Oregon to have Uncle Phil out there?
Yeah.
Right? Those blank checks go a whole long way. So, Jordan, and I'm talking about the real Jordan, the UNC Jordan. If you're listening to this, there's opportunity for you to decide to be UNC's, sugar daddy on this. So the ceiling is the roof if you want to get involved.
Throw Bill a quarterback.
Yeah,
Greg.
Come on, MJ.
Greg, speaking of the coaching, I think Belichick and them talked about wanting to build from the inside out from day one. And we've sort of seen that manifest itself in the coaches that they have, Jason Mitchell, Friend, also Diaco on the defensive side. But the improvement on the offensive line there, I mean, is it a real improvement? I guess we'll find out. But I just feels like that's the reason the offense looks so much better for Gio, for Carolina fans, everybody against Syracuse. Is the Blaske move, is the offense in general, Jordan Hall and the other guys, Miles McVay. This is the development that makes the program better that maybe not people don't understand has been happening.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you go back to the preseason, who did Jason say was the most important player up front? Blaske.
Yep.
And so I really think, when they brought him back and put him on the edge, that to me really spoke to the fact that they need him on the field wherever they can get him to plug holes as he's getting healthy. I think it was pretty evident that he was not fully healthy when he was playing tackle. And I think as you see, Hall, I mean, they played 41 snaps last week. So as you have some of these guys starting to play well, Lindbergh's another one. You're starting to see growth and starting to see some gelling. And now when you move Austin back to center, kind of his natural position, that's such a key component of the offense. I've harped all year long about the running backs not being able to break tackles and create space. It's a lot easier to be able to break tackles and create space when there's actually running lanes there for you, when you can actually get a head start and you have guys pulling for you and you can actually breathe a little bit, and then you can hit a would-be tackler a little bit harder. And I think we saw that at Syracuse. I mean, the fact that I'm not sure exactly what they had. I think they had 8 broken tackles, which was by far a season high. Part of that credit goes to the offensive line as well.
Part of it goes to Syracuse, who can't tackle at all. For sure. But all those things kind of come in together. And again, it's the momentum, it's confidence building. And a lot of people can just be dismissive of the offense, and I get it. I understand. But when you're at the bottom, you're fighting for air. You want any little piece of positive news that you can grab onto to build upon. And so all this growth and opportunity against, even if it's weaker teams, you can use that. You can use that as fuel and fire. I think we're starting to see that. And that's going to be the case again on Saturday. So you just have to continue to build on those opportunities. Duke's better offensively, of course, than defense. The defense is not what it's been recently. That's still a better unit than what Carolina has faced the last couple of weeks. So that'll be a test. But I do think, against Stanford, there's opportunity for significant growth across not only the offensive line, but also the
the skill position groups.
Jason, while I'm talking about my razor, get your offense, what Carolina's offense is going to do against Stanford and how to have success against Stanford ready. We're going to talk about Dollar Shave Club. From the sink to the stadium still remains my favorite thing that we talk about on this show. Sink to the stadium, if you're an alum, if you're a fan, if you're a friend of a fan, if you're the better half of a fan, get them the Carolina handle from Dollar Shave Club. You can go to dollarshaveclub.com, or you can find them in any of your local stores. All the big box stores have them. There's the box. If you see it, pick it up. It's relatively cheap. Gets you a smooth shave, gets you going, gets you ready for the game. Like I said, if you're going to shave in style. If you're a Carolina fan, go to Dollar Shave Club and get it done. Jason, 30 minutes into the show, I need some game planning. What's Carolina's approach against this Stanford team? We've seen them win a few. They've looked bad against some good teams, and they've looked mediocre against some bad teams. But Carolina's approach here feels like a similar approach than it was last week. But you look at it deeper than I do. What you think?
Well, it is a very similar approach. And one of the things, you remember the big thing that we talked about last week going into the game was a big plays. That Syracuse had given up a ton of big plays over the course of the year, that they were among the nation's worst in 10-plus yard plays given up. And they were among the very worst in 20-yard plays given up, which, by the way, after the UNC game against Power 5 competition, Syracuse is now 130th, last in the country in 10-plus yard plays given up against Power 4 competition. And they are 124th in 20-plus yard plays given up. So that it held up, and UNC was another team that was able to get big plays against Stanford, or against Syracuse, the other coast, the team with an S. So now
has there ever been a conference week to week where a team has played in their own conference teams further apart than Syracuse and Stanford?
Week to week, I bet not. I mean, the closest you would get is the Big Ten with Rutgers and maybe Rutgers and UCLA, or Rutgers and USC, but I don't think anybody's done that back to back yet. So yeah, this has got to be something new there. Maybe the old whack when you had Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
That was the weird one, but
at least it was Hawaii.
Generally, the way that they did that is that any team that had to play at Hawaii got a bye the week following. But yeah, that's a whole different thing. But so I bring that up not just to talk about last week, but to bring up Stanford, because Stanford also is really, really bad at giving up big plays. Stanford right now is 112th in big plays given up and 10-plus yard plays given up. And they are 121st with 36 plays of longer than 20 yards given up. A very similar kind of statistical breakdown in terms of the inability to avoid the inability to avoid big plays defensively. So if you're North Carolina, what do you do when you see this? Well, number one, you start looking at it and you say, well, is that because they can't stop the run or because they can't stop the pass? Well, the answer is kind of both. They're 90th in stopping in 10-plus yard run plays given up. And in 20-plus yard plays against the run, they're 72nd. They've given up 5. And against the pass, well, that's a whole different thing. Against the pass, they're not a whole lot better. They are 121st in giving up pass plays, in long passing plays. And if you go 20-plus yard passing plays, it gets a whole lot worse. They're 126th in giving up long pass plays. So what do? You say, okay, here's what you've got to figure out. You've got to figure out how can you get matchups that you like downfield. Your quarterback has shown the ability to throw some downfield stuff if his feet are set and he's protected well. You've got a couple receivers who, with Ship and some others, if you can get them on those crossing routes, those overs and things that you like, you might be able to get some big plays. You're trying to scheme up some of that stuff. I'm looking at this as run the football as much as you can to try to, if you can just manage to win at the line of scrimmage a little bit, or even stalemate there, you're going to break some tackles against this team in the running game. But the biggest thing is you've got to pick your spots for some play action shots, because they can't cover downfield. They have a big problem with giving up those long pass plays and giving up plays where a guy will catch it and break a tackle and go. So you have a couple extra plays in your pocket for play action, first down. We got to hit this shot play. And the shot play has this as your, backup option if they cover that well. Find ways to max protect your quarterback and give him some opportunities against the secondary. Find ways to simplify it so that it's a 2 or 3 man route where you're getting guys out there in one-on-ones that they're going to win. That's what you're looking at in this game to me.
Sounds simple enough, Greg.
Well, I mean, here's a stat to kind of sum all that up. Number one, when you look at the NFL rating allowed, Stanford's at 108.4.
It's amazing.
Like, elite quarterbacks have numbers close to that. But
that would be in contention to win the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah.
If that were a single quarterback, those numbers would have that guy in New York this year.
For sure.
It's just whatever quarterback is playing Stanford, not named Tommy Castellanos, is going to be tearing them up.
Here's the stat, though, that I think speaks volumes to what Jason just talked about with the passing defense of Stanford. According to Pro Football Focus, Stanford's allowed 17 passing touchdowns. They've broken up 22. So they've allowed 17 touchdowns and they've broken up 22 passes. It's not a good ratio. It's not a good ratio. And they've only had 3 picks.
Well, they got a couple defensive linemen that have done some work.
Clay Patterson's really good up front
when
he's not getting penalties for TikTok dances. But he's a good player.
Greg Barnes is – what number is he? Oh, I'm not going to say
91.
that number.
It is not, no. He's certainly
you
not.
Took a risk there, Tommy. You took a risk.
Tafidi's pretty good too. I mean, they've got some players on the defensive line. To Jason's point, you got to max protect Gio.
They do, and they've got similar to what we talked about last week. I mean, if you look at what they've done defensively, getting pressure, they've got a decent number of pressures. They're 128 pressures this season. They've only got 17 sacks, according to PFF. So very much like Syracuse, they're trying to get after the quarterback. They don't blitz like Syracuse does to that extent, but they're trying to put pressure on, and they're getting a little bit of pressure. They're not getting the quarterback down. So I do think this is an opportunity, given what Jason laid out. I don't know if you want to call them shot plays, but maybe keep a running back in or keep a tight end in, give Gio a little bit extra time to throw the ball and take some shots down the field, because there's going to be opportunities.
A bunch of them.
And he needs to be able to hit on some of those. And the way that North Carolina's defense is playing, if you can just have a few home run plays that hit, like we saw last week, completely changes the complexion of the game. And Carolina has to be able to do that. Yes, Stanford's not a great run defense team either. They've been okay, and partly because of those defensive linemen that we've talked about. But if you can have a balanced attack and take some shots down the field, I think that's the strategy to be able to have some success offensively.
Yeah, and I'm going to build on that real quick. What you want to do is this is a game where you run to set up the pass. Your aim is you're not trying to run for first downs. You're not your aim is not to run the football. Your aim is I'm running enough to try to set up the plays in the passing game so that I can score points. You really are trying to set up the pass. Now, there are some games where you pass to set up the run or you just come out throwing. I think because of their defensive line, which I do think, their front three and really front four, if you start, if you include Tafiti in there as a outside backer, they've got some guys that can get after the quarterback, and they're actually pretty stout against the run. I mean, Patterson at that one defensive end, he's 6'3", 280. He's not small, right? Your other defensive end in that three-man line, 6'3", 285. They're big, and they do a pretty good job. Now they're not huge on the at the nose, but they do a pretty good job of sort of plugging things up on the inside. So, if you're going to rely on trying to run it down their throats, that's probably not the best idea. But if you can run it just enough for them to have to be honest, and then, like you said, keep a back in, keep a tight end in, identify who you need to chip that the extra rusher, do these sorts of things. And if you give your guy enough time, there are going to be people open in this back seven. There just are. You're going to have lots of opportunities. Just don't be stupid with it. Put it on target a few times, and you're gonna score points against this team.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing to watch for Stanford. They like Jason and Greg mentioned, defensive line's fairly strong. They do miss tackles in the back end, and numbers back it up, like Jason talked about earlier.
Syracuse 2.0.
Yeah, they will certainly give Carolina some opportunities, and we've seen as the weeks have gone, the broken tackles have sort of picked up a little bit. Damon June sort of leads that way, Lopez leads the way, but there's plays to be made. We're talking with Greg Barnes, Jason Staples here on the Game Plan podcast. That was Carolina's offensive approach against the Stanford defense. Greg, you mentioned Carolina's defense has been stepping up. They have. It's an interesting dynamic that Stanford's changed quarterbacks, going with Elijah Brown, and he hung Kamori House's last loss in high school on him. Kamori talked about that in the press conference. It's what happens when you get ACC teams in Stanford or in California, and California players transferring to Carolina from Washington. It's wild. But Greg, Carolina's defensive approach here.
Well, first of all, we talked a lot about along the offensive line, there's been growth and development, and how that's a credit to the coaching staff. I think you kind of have to say the same about some of the North Carolina players as well. I mean, when you look at guys like Smith and Caleb Collis on the back end, they had really good games last week. I think you're seeing some good play from those guys, and part of that, they're getting some more playing time. And I think that's important. We've seen the guys up front. Melcart and Isaiah Johnson have done a really good job along the defensive line. And so you're seeing some growth, and I think that's important, and that the more guys you can play, you're not having to play, the starters so many snaps. That helps, and that really helps late in games. But for North Carolina, you mentioned Elijah Brown coming in. They had really struggled. I mean, when you look at some of their numbers, they've been pretty poor passing the ball, and that's the reason Brown's coming in. He's got a big arm. I mean, he was a 4-star kid, really talented kid out of California. Not really a runner, so you don't have to worry about it from that perspective. But they just were not having a lot of success passing the ball. And when you look at what they've done running the ball, they have been atrocious. I mean, like really bad. I mean, granted, they played Pitt last week, but they averaged negative 0.3 yards per play. And that's what Narduzzi loves to do. That's why I like him, because he's going to sell out to stop the run. But other than going off against BC for 213 yards in week 3, they've been horrific. I mean, they averaged 0.79 yards per carry against BYU, 1.13 against Virginia, 1.4 against San Jose State, 2.2 against SMU, against Miami, 2.0, Florida State, 3.1.
In a win against Florida State, 3.1.
In a win.
One of the weirdest statistical games I've ever seen.
So this is an offense that cannot run the ball, and they've been so poor in the passing game that they had to switch quarterbacks. So don't mess up if you're Carolina's defense. Like don't fall down and allow a 80-yard score. I mean, that's don't overthink this. Like, you know that there's a young kid coming in at quarterback who does have a really good arm. I mean, you'll see him take some shots down the field. He looks the part. He's got a lot of potential, but he's not a kid that's going to run. So he is more of a true pocket passer. And so you have to be aware of that. But take away the run and make the young kid beat you with his arm.
It sounds like a simple game plan. Jason, don't mess up. Don't fumble on offense for scoop and score, and have your offense outscore your defense or outscore your own offense like Carolina was doing there in the first half against Syracuse. But Jason, a couple points I want to make, then I want you to run with it. Smith Vilbert's hustle on scooping that fumble was exactly what we talked about the week before with Kamari House not hustling to help Marcus Allen on that tackle. That is something to watch in a game like this, and that is definitely an improvement. The loafing was not there against Syracuse. Tyler Thompson played well. Jason, who stands out in this game plan, and what do? You just stack the box and keep them from running, or do you need to stack the box to keep them from running? Because it sounds like from what Greg read off, what's Buck always say, Greg? Couldn't run through a paper bag or some mess like that. It sounds like we're in that type of situation with Stanford's offense.
It's not that bad. I mean, the thing is, they've got some big athletes on the offensive line, and there are times where they've been able to open some holes. They just haven't really had it. They don't have a back that really is a difference maker, and that's an issue for them. And Carolina knows what that feels like. I mean, that was the first half of the season for Carolina. But I don't think that this is one where – so it is kind of Syracuse 2.0 on this side of the ball as well. I mean, Greg, you said it. They've struggled to run the ball, and now they're changing quarterbacks. That sounds eerily familiar from last week. But the difference is that instead of changing to a lacrosse player who's a walk-on, they're going to a 4-star recruit who does have the tools to be a player. But I mean, he's got 35 dropbacks under his belt total career. So I think in this case, you don't play it the way that you could against Syracuse, where you just didn't believe that guy could make any of the throws to beat you at a certain point. I mean, after the first quarter, I think Belichick and the rest of them were on the phones going, they can't score on us because that kid can't throw. They're not going to be able to throw the ball on us. Let's just go ahead and attack. In this one, I think you have to come out and just play sound defense. You don't load the box and try to force this guy to make, to prove that he can throw right away. I think you do just play your base stuff initially, and you see, okay, can they run it on us at all? Do we need to put an extra guy in the box? Because if not, then don't. And then the quarterback is going to eventually have to make throws against the full secondary. And, you got an inexperienced guy. And what did we talk about last week against Syracuse? Change the picture on him a little bit, and you're going to get a pick. And what happened? They changed the picture on him a few times, and there are a few times where his eyes were in the wrong spot, and he threw the ball to the wrong guys. Didn't always come up with it, but that's what you want. And I think you do the same thing here. You've got a very young quarterback. This is the kind of thing where if you're going to pick a situation for a Belichick defense to face, it's facing a young green quarterback. Right? I mean, a young green quarterback without a major running game to lean on, that's his wheelhouse right there. Just go ahead and find ways to confuse him and make life difficult for him. So I think you just play your defense. I think you just line up and you say, force them to prove that they can run it first. Run it on our defensive tackles, run it on our base, prove that they can do it. That's what I'm doing. And then if they do that, then you bring an extra guy in. But otherwise, if they aren't proven that they can do better than 3 yards a carry, well, they're going to go 3 yards, and it's third down, and then you change the picture on them. So I think that's how you do this.
Yeah, and Tommy, Michael Ford was about the only running back they had early in the year that was solid. He got hurt against Florida State. Not sure yet if he's going to be able to go, but he's missed the last couple games, and he wasn't great, but he played a lot last year. He had a little bit of success, but he was their primary guy, and he's been out of late. So that's further issues for Stanford.
Yeah, I mean, he also had 75-yard run earlier in the season too, so he had that breakaway ability. Nobody else has a run more than 28 yards for Stanford. Looking at Elijah Brown's passing, I mean, I know it's a small sample size, but PFF grade when blitzed,
It's not good.
it's 29.3.
Yeah, a lot of that's from the very end of the Florida State game when he came in for Galbranson then, and that was when FSU was in kind of panic mode and they were bringing pressure, and he was not able to really get the ball out. I do remember seeing that. So
yeah, so he is, but like you mentioned, on the season, he's 19 of 31 for 218 yards on the season. So Carolina's got some potential here. It is time to move. Well, I got to talk about Johnny T-Shirt too. We'll say the prediction portion of the show is sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Go see them on Franklin Street. They've got football gear still. They've got basketball gear. Of course, Carolina's got a huge basketball game tomorrow night. If you're in Chapel Hill, go see Johnny T-Shirt on Franklin Street before you go over to the Smith Center. Load up. They have been loading up, getting ready for the holidays. They've got you set up at Johnny T-Shirt, alumni-owned and operated, small business, most importantly, small business, not big box, not these mega billionaire stores that we were talking about earlier when we were talking money. Johnny T-Shirt is homegrown and has been there forever. Take care of them. Get your 10% off if you're an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber. Predictions. I think I put Greg up first last time. I'm going with Jason this time. What's the line? 7.5 or some change like that. Jason, what you got and how's it happen?
yeah, I think this one's another one where, if you look at the metrics, you finally say, you know what, Carolina's actually playing a game they ought to be favored in. Just like last week, we talked about that. Like, this is a team that they really should beat with the way that these teams have played in recent weeks. But this is a scarier team to me than Syracuse. So Syracuse, I felt was really on the decline, and they've just been helpless offensively without their starter. I do think that, Stanford's got just enough teeth to make you worry. I mean, they scored 20 against Pittsburgh. Pitt's not bad defensively. They couldn't run it at all, but they were able to score. So, and we know that for Carolina, scoring over 20 has been a bit of an ordeal this year. So that's what gives me pause. But at the end of the day, I do think a Belichick defense against a very green quarterback against an offense that hasn't really been able to run it all that well, that they've got a couple of decent receivers, but there's nobody that is out there that's, lighting the world on fire at receiver. That's a huge game breaker. So at that point you say, okay, I think again, the magic number in this one, Greg Barnes, is right around 21 points. You score about 21 points. I think probably the magic number actually is, I'll say the magic number in this one is 24. I feel a little bit more confident about Stanford being able to hit 21 to 24. But I think if you score 24 or more, you probably win this football game. And against that Stanford defense, in terms of what they've shown, giving up 35 to Pitt, 42 to Miami, 34 to SMU, 29 to San Jose State, 48 to Virginia, 20 to BC, and that's a bad BC team. They give up 20 points to everybody. So with the way that I think Carolina's overall offensive line started to look, with some of the marginal improvement that we've started to see, I'm going to pick Carolina to win this game also. So I'm going to go with Carolina wins this. I do think it'll be closer than the Syracuse game, but I do think they'll actually be comfortable even in the fourth quarter. I think Kenan will not be emptied out at the beginning of the fourth quarter for the first time this year. I'm going to go with North Carolina 27, Stanford 20.
7-point win, not a cover if it stays where it is. Greg, I got yours by slack, so I know you're not cheating. But what you got?
So it's hard to disagree with much of anything that Jason said there. I do think the fact that Stanford has struggled to run the ball the way that they have, I think that plays in North Carolina's favor. And I think even though Elijah Brown clearly is a lot better than the lacrosse player that Syracuse trotted out last week, because he does have a good arm, I think if you can take away the run game and put him behind the chains, that's going to put a lot of pressure on him. And I think that sets North Carolina up for some turnovers. So I think the defense is just primed to have a really good game. And last week was weird because, it was really kind of a situation where you knew the kid couldn't beat you. And not that you play tentative, but you kind of like, we can kind of get after him a little bit, but we got to be cautious. And it was just kind of a weird dynamic. And I think this is more of a traditional game. And I think North Carolina's defense is going to be able to create some turnovers and really limit what Stanford can do. I thought about Belichick trying to run up the score and you maybe get to 27. I don't know that that's going to happen. So I've got North Carolina winning this one 20-10, which is a cover. And I think that would be 4 games in a row that North Carolina covers.
Interesting. Y'all are going. I'm going. I thought it would be a higher scoring game last week, and I had Carolina 30-some, but I'm going 33-16. Carolina wins. There is another defense.
What are you seeing out of this offense?
An offensive explosion.
Greg, I mean, you just have to see the positives and the belief that it's going to happen one day, and but I think that 33 points. I feel it. I feel 33. White. The white helmets and the blue jerseys and the blue pants. It reminds me of the flea flicker that Marquise threw to Ryan Switzer. I guess that was in 15 against Duke. It won't be that kind of day, but it'll be a 33 day, and Stanford will have 16. But I do feel another defensive touchdown coming. I have picked 2 of those this year, and they both hit. So we're going for 3. I wish I could make some money on the betting side of it. Anything left, boys? It sounds like it's going to be a nice day in Kenan Stadium. It's a 4:30 game, which I think is a really ideal time for this time of year. Tailgating inside Carolina Live in the Bowls lot from 1:30 to 3:30. Carolina basketball on Friday night. Just a lot going on in Chapel Hill. Anything left, Greg? What else?
It's going to be a fantastic weekend in Chapel Hill. The Tar Heels are going to win on Friday night. Everybody's going to party, just stroll to the tailgate on Saturday, and then Carolina's going to take care of business against Stanford. And then everybody will go to sleep shortly thereafter because they stayed up all night Friday partying.
There you go.
Just me, or does it look like there's some hope on the basketball side?
Yeah, a lot of good pieces.
What's crazy to me is I listened to Bill Self's press conference, and he's never been to Chapel Hill. He said, I've never been in there. Obviously, Kansas hasn't, but I would just assume that Self had been at the building, or it's wild that they've never played in Chapel Hill.
That's a crazy thing too. I mean, that's two of the 4 premier programs historically in college basketball, and one of them's never played at the other.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild, but should be a fun. I wonder if you had a Bowls lot parking pass for the basketball game and for the football game, you just sleep in your car. I mean, that would be ideal. I'm sure it's been done. Well, they do have one of those. They've got an RV lot, and there's some partying going over there. But anyway, we're getting out of here. Shout out to the 200 folks that have been hanging with us all night. Shout out to everybody that's been supporting Inside Carolina. Go to InsideCarolina.com. Get your premium subscription if you don't have it already. Get Jason's breakdowns. Jason's breakdowns have taught more people about football than anything on the website. Greg's columns teach more people about the intricate details of how all this stuff fits together. And then these shows just bring it all together in one big pile of parties and presents and good things. Everybody stay safe.